Spider-Man's animated shows have always played a crucial role in shaping his legacy, bringing the iconic web-slinger to new generations. These series have at their best been the best adaptations of the characters, highlighting his struggles, wit, and humanity in ways the comics and films can't always match. From his early days in animation to more recent takes, these shows have not only expanded Spider-Man's world, but have also deepened our connection to him. Whether hitting or missing, they've all contributed to the evolution of one of the most enduring superheroes of all time. And with Spider-Man Freshman Year coming out in less than 2 weeks, it's clear that the web-slinger's animated journey is far from over, offering us yet another chance to reimagine Peter Parker for a whole new audience. So let's get into ranking all the Spider-Man shows, from the worst to the best. Let's get started. We start off with, of course, Marvel's Spider-Man 2017. And I have to say, my opinions on the show haven't changed that much. Now, I'm not trying to hate on it, but this show is really hard to enjoy. Not just as a Spider-Man show, but as a superhero show in general. First off, the biggest issue for me is Spider-Man himself, Peter Parker, doesn't even feel like Spider-Man in this show. He feels like everyone else. This was a huge problem for me. Peter Parker is portrayed as a super smart scientist, and like the rest of the characters in this show, they're all scientists. And by episode 10, Miles Morales is already Spider-Man. Soon after that, we get Spider-Gwen and then Spider-Woman. So by the middle of the season, Spider-Man isn't even the main character in his own show. I hated this. 4 Spider people at once? Miles was already a stretch, but I've grown to appreciate the Peter and Miles dynamic, especially thanks to the Spider-Verse movies and the recent video games. But throwing in 2 more Spider-Women just felt unnecessary, and it completely undermined the idea of Spider-Man being a solo hero. Watching them form a spider team just made the show feel even more bloated and less focused, and was one of the major reasons I disliked this series. Another reason the show failed for me is of course the art style. Now, when the concept art was released, I was really excited. Vibrant colors, dynamic poses, amazing villain designs, and Patrick Brown's art looked incredible. But when the show actually came out, it felt like a huge letdown. The final animation looked flat, characters seemed oddly designed, and the villain designs like Rhino and Doc Ock, and even Spider-Man himself were just disappointing. It's hard to appreciate the art when it's so visually underwhelming, and there's no shading, no depth, it just feels cheap. Another issue is how the show handles Spider-Man's actual role. For a show that's supposed to be about Spider-Man, he barely swings around New York. Instead, he spends most of his time in Horizon High, a futuristic school for gifted students. And it's not just any school. These kids are supposedly smarter than Tony Stark, which is a pretty ridiculous concept. Almost every villain comes from Horizon or from Norman Osborn's school down the street. Electro's a student, Rhino's a student, Doc Ock and Vulture are both teachers, and it's like they ran out of ideas for unique villains. We barely see any classic Spider-Man rogues who aren't somehow tied to either of these schools. Now listen, as much as I hate the show, I do think it was getting better with time, and I did like some of the arcs that were added in the later seasons, like the Symbiote Saga as well as the Superior Spider-Man arc. It was great in the Symbiote arc because it wasn't the best adaptation of the arc that we were getting, but they were still trying with it, and I can respect that. But the Superior Spider-Man arc was great, as this was the first show to adapt it, and they did a nice job. Miles can tell right away it isn't Peter, so the whole time he's trying to help him, and it really helps the arc shine as we see the whole Avengers getting involved because Spider-Man isn't acting like himself. It's also a nice arc for Otto to have at the end of the season where he realizes he's not Spider-Man, and it's a really strong ending to the season as a whole. Now, this show was cancelled during season 3, which means it must have not been doing that well. I could barely watch this show for more than 10 minutes without doing something else like writing the script talking about how bad it really is. In conclusion, Marvel's Spider-Man 2017 was a show where they tried their best making a Spider-Man show, and in the end, it's just a disappointing show that on paper should have succeeded, but in the end, the show failed to meet all expectations, and what we get is what we have now, which is the worst Spider-Man show on the list. Next on the list, we have SpiderMan Unlimited. Now, SpiderMan Unlimited is a show that deserves respect for the effort put into it, especially given the challenging circumstances it was created under. First, it's important to address the restrictions placed on the show. First off, it wasn't connected to the 90s Spider-Man show, it's not Spider-Man 2099, and they couldn't use majority of Spider-Man's major supporting cast or villains. Now, with that in mind, the series follows Spider-Man as he travels to a parallel world, Counter-Earth, where evolved beasts dominate and humans are enslaved by the High Evolutionary. Yes, this villain was also in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, though that version is far more compelling than the portrayal we get here. Now, the show kicks off with Spider-Man fighting Venom and Carnage who try to hijack a spaceship to travel to Counter-Earth. Now, we never get an explanation of why they're doing this, but that's the show, I guess. The spaceship is piloted by John Jameson, who's on a mission to go to Counter-Earth to meet with the people there. Spider-Man stops Venom and Carnage before heading back to Earth. Now, the visuals carry this show heavy. The animation is amazing, and I'm definitely a fan of the new Spider-Man Unlimited suit that we get here, and I think it's one of the best suits of all time for Spider-Man. Anyway, Peter returns home and considers giving up being Spider-Man because of everything he's been through and the lack of appreciation for his effort. That is, until John Jameson sends a distress signal from Counter-Earth, warning that the planet is dangerous and that he's been captured. Being the hero he is, Spider-Man decides to act. He ends up stealing a suit from the Fantastic Four, hijacks a spaceship, and flies off to help John escape Counter-Earth. Now, Counter-Earth itself feels like a mix of the Thundercats with some Spider-Man villain hybrids. It's kind of weird. Vulture is an actual vulture, Electro is an electric eel, and Green Goblin is an anti-hero for some reason, so that's pretty weird. Then there's Kraven, who's a human but still wants to kill Spider-Man and is not part of the human resistance, which is also really weird. This show is weird. I think I've covered that. Anyway, once Spider-Man arrives to the Counter-Earth, he meets up with John Jameson and joins the human resistance, made up of the remaining humans on the planet. Together they work to escape the dystopian world. Spider-Man's many plot points underdeveloped or non-sensational, and while this show had potential and some standout moments, it ultimately feels like a strange, uneven detour in Spider-Man's animated history, and it doesn't quite stick the landing like other shows on this list. So that's why it's here at the second worst show on this list. But next up we have SpiderMan 1967. Now this show right here is where it all started. Before the multiverse, before the movies, and before the insane amount of Spider-Man spin-offs we have today. This was the original animated Spider-Man show. And honestly, you have to respect it for that alone. Now let's not act like it's some high budget masterpiece. The animation was really rough in this show. They reused shots all the time, the character models went off consistently, and Spider-Man's swinging scenes were basically the same repeated 3-second clip hopped over and over and over. But you know what? The jankiness is part of Spider-Man's 1967's charm. It's so retro and weird that it somehow loops back around to being cool. It has that it's so bad it's good energy, but you can also tell there was real effort and love put into it. Now, then there's the theme song. Everybody knows this theme song. It's been remixed, referenced, and reused in movies, games, and newer shows, and it defined the sound of Spider-Man for generations. As for the actual episodes, I watched a couple of them before these videos, and the stories are really basic. A villain shows up, causes chaos, Spider-Man stops them, rinse and repeat. But a show from the 60s, that's kind of expected. And sometimes the villains weren't even from the comics. They just made up some random bad guys with weird powers or science experiments gone wrong. But every now and then we got classic enemies like Electro, Green Goblin, and Mysterio. And even if they were super simplified, it was still dope to see them animated for the first time ever. One thing I really appreciate is that even back then, they still captured Peter Parker's core struggles. He's broke, he's stressed, and he's trying to live a normal life while saving the city. And this balance of superhero and regular guy, it's here. It's rough around the edges, but the foundation is solid. So yeah, Spider-Man 1967 is definitely dated. The voice acting is kind of stiff, the pacing is weird, and half the time it feels like they made episodes up on the spot. But honestly, it's part of history. It's the reason we have shows like Spectacular SpiderMan, Spider-Man Friendly Neighborhood, and even Spider-Man the Animated Series. This show walked, tripped, and sometimes fell flat on its face so the other shows on this list could run. Going from another really old show to another old show, of course I'm talking about Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends, a show that I really enjoyed rewatching. I mean, this show is old and like super weird at times, but at the heart of it all, I would say it's pretty enjoyable. You follow Spider-Man, but this time he's joined by his amazing friends, Iceman and Firestar, and Firestar was literally made for this show. This show is also heavily connected to the main Marvel universe, and there's a lot of Marvel characters that show up in this show, and that kind of makes the universe feel more lived in. Okay, let's actually talk about the show. Now, let's start with the animation. The animation is really stiff. Characters move like they're trying not to pull a muscle, and the action scenes are not exactly fluid. You'll catch the same punches and swing cycles getting reused a lot, and the voice acting, while charming, definitely has that old school over-the-top Saturday morning energy. Still though, there's something wholesome about this show. The show balances lighthearted fun with the occasional attempt at a deeper storytelling. It doesn't really succeed with that, but it's still a good attempt. There's scenes where Firestar wrestles with her past as a mutant, or when they confront villains like Magneto, Doctor Doom, or even the Green Goblin. It's not super intense or groundbreaking, but it has heart, and you could tell the creators cared about making it. So yeah, Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends isn't perfect. It's old, cheesy, and the animation's a bit stiff, but for its time it was pretty decent, and it's definitely a decent show on this list. But next up we have Ultimate Spider-Man. Ultimate Spider-Man is a show that holds a special place in my heart. After the abrupt end of Spectacular SpiderMan, a series that I absolutely loved and you're going to see later on this list, Ultimate Spider-Man came in and became the Spider-Man that I grew up with. It felt like a fresh take, a modernized animated version of an MCU-style Spidey thrown into an MCU-adjacent universe to compare with those movies that were coming out at that time. The show had a fun, energetic tone packed with cool cameos from across the Marvel universe. Seeing characters like Deadpool show up was exciting as a kid, and it made the world feel big and alive. That said, I never really fully clicked with this team dynamic. Pairing Spider-Man with SHIELD-trained teens like White Tiger and Power Man felt a little forced at times and took away from the classic friendly neighborhood vibe that defines Peter Parker. He's Spider-Man, he works alone, and that's what makes a lot of these shows on this list work, and that's why Ultimate Spider-Man didn't work for me. The show also leaned heavily into a cartoony, kiddish style, breaking the fourth wall, exaggerated facial animation, slapstick humor, and that stupid ass monkey sound, bro. Oh my god, that shit was playing every episode over like 10 times, bro. That shit was so fucking annoying. Sorry. Now, this made it fun, but often made it feel less like a superhero story and more like a Marvel-flavored Saturday morning cartoon. Still, despite those drawbacks, Ultimate Spider-Man managed to carve out its own identity. It wasn't trying to be spectacular, it was trying to be its own thing, and it definitely had some good arcs in it, like the Contest of Champions arc, and the ending arc with the Sinister Six and the Doc Ock one. It was doing its own thing, and for a whole generation of fans, including me, it succeeded. I think Ultimate Spider-Man gets harshly criticized because it was way too kiddish for us, but I think it's a decent show, and on paper, it's the 4th best show here. Next on the list is Spider-Man Friendly Neighborhood. Finally, after 3 years, we have a new Spider-Man animated show, and this show is good, like really good. I wasn't sold when it was first announced. The style, the 3D animation, and the premise didn't really have me hooked. But after watching the first season, I'm all in. This might be one of the best starts to a Spider-Man show we've had in a long time. What makes Spider-Man Friendly Neighborhood stand out is how it forges its own identity. It's clearly inspired by the MCU. We get the Civil War references, the Avengers Tower, and an overall shared universe feel. But it's not just retreading old ground. This isn't Ultimate Spider-Man, and it's definitely not Marvel Spider-Man from 2017. This show feels fresh, and there's something good about that. The biggest strength here is obviously Peter Parker. He's a younger Spidey, only a few months into being a hero, and that story leads into that. He's still figuring it out. He's not overpowered and he struggles, and that's what makes it work. His origin here is unique too. He gets bitten during a fight between Doctor Strange and some weird Venom creature, which we later revisit in the finale, and it actually pays off really well. Now the 3D animation, while I had my doubts and I still think it's not the greatest, it does look decent in some scenes, and the fight scenes are very fluid, intense, and some of the best we've ever seen in a Spider-Man show. And there's even some Invincible level energy in a few moments, especially with characters like Scorpion. Speaking of the villains though, the show takes a smart approach. Instead of dropping in big names right away, we get a bunch of original made for the show villains, which reminds me of the Untold Tales of Spider-Man. Then we see for some familiar faces, obviously like Tombstone, and then like I mentioned before, Scorpion. This show's not perfect. Norman Osborn discovering Peter's identity in episode 2 feels way too rushed. The guy in the chair dynamic between Peter and Norman is interesting, but I think it needed more build up, and there's also moments that feel like they're moving a little fast, skipping emotional beats that could have hit harder. But overall, Spider-Man Friendly Neighborhood is off to an amazing start, and the end credit scene has just got me more excited for season 2. It's bold, fun, emotional, and most importantly, it feels like something new, and it respects Spider-Man's legacy without being chained to it. If this show keeps this energy going, we might be witnessing the rise of a new fan favorite Spider-Man show. But next on the list we have, coming in as the second best Spider-Man show ever, in my opinion, is Spider-Man the Animated Series. Now, this show from 1994 is an absolute classic, and honestly, it was the birthplace of the Spider-Man in mainstream media for so many of us. This show was able to define Spider-Man for a generation. That iconic intro with the electric guitar, robotic vocals, instant nostalgia. The animation style was dark, gritty, and serious, and it treated Spider-Man with the weight and respect he deserved, without ever feeling too mature for kids, and it found the perfect balance with that. What really makes this show special are the story arcs. They didn't just throw in random villains for single episode fights, they built entire seasons around character development and consequences. The symbiote saga is legendary. This is the first time we see the symbiote actually affect Peter's mental ability. Watching Peter slowly lose himself in the black suit, battle his inner demons, and then finally face off against Venom. That was peak Spider-Man storytelling. And let's not forget about the Clone Saga, and also the first ever introduction of the Spider-Verse, and I think they did that pretty well. Another big strength here is Peter Parker himself. This version of Peter felt mature, conflicted, and driven. He wasn't just quipping around through fights, he was carrying guilt, making tough choices, and constantly learning. His relationships with characters like Mary Jane and even villains like Morbius were complex and engaging. The impact of this show is massive. For many of us, it was our first introduction to characters like Blade, Punisher, Daredevil, and even the X-Men for some people. Spider-Man the Animated Series fans will tell you that this show held its own. It made Spider-Man a household name and paved the way for its movies, games, and future shows. That's why I have it here at the second best show on the list. But for the first best show, I have Spectacular SpiderMan. No debate, this show is the gold standard for how to adapt Peter Parker and his world to the screen. Everything about it, from the writing to the character development to the pacing, was near perfect. First off, let's talk about how it handled Peter Parker. He's a teenager here, trying to balance school, friends, family, and being a superhero, and you feel that struggle in almost every episode. There's so many episodes where he has to call Aunt May when he's running late, and that usually means he's in a battle with like Electro or the Lizard or something, and that at the end of the day, that's Spider-Man. That's what we want to see adapted to the screen. The villain arcs were also massively done. It wasn't just a villain of the week. Every character had real depth. The transformation of Eddie Brock into Venom was amazing. Eddie was introduced in season 1 as Peter's friend, and then all the way in season 2 he became Venom. Otto Octavius got turned into Doc Ock later in season 1, and Green Goblin, the huge twist was that it was Harry, and then the season finale revealed that it was actually Norman the whole time, which is what Peter suspected. That's what we need from Spider-Man shows, it to be more like the comics, twists and turns at every corner, and that's what makes the Spectacular Spider-Man one of the best shows of all time. Now, let's talk about the animation style. It was simple but expressive. It let the action scenes shine. Every fight had a great choreography, fluid motion, creative web-slinging moments, and it felt alive. The show also had a strong supporting cast with Gwen, Mary Jane, Flash, and obviously Harry, all given their own development, and the show didn't treat them like background characters. Everyone had a role to play in Peter's growth, both as a hero and as a person. But what hurts the most about the show is the fact that it ended too soon. 2 seasons. Yeah, that's it. And yet, in just 26 episodes, it told a more complete and emotional and iconic Spider-Man story than most shows ever get close to. It respected the character and his world, and it made us care as fans. Now, to wrap it all up, each show has brought something different to the table, and as a Spider-Man fan, it's just amazing to see how far we've come. Here's hoping Spider-Man Friendly Neighborhood lives up to the legacy of the greats, and maybe, just maybe, swing its way to the top to become the greatest Spider-Man show of all time. But that's it for now. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Peace.